Hi, everybody. It's Sherri. Welcome back to my channel. This is a new episode of 3D Interference. Today, I'm going to talk about elders. This is a really important topic, and I really feel it's necessary to bring this one up sooner because what humanity doesn't know is there are a lot of nefarious things that they've done to the elderly population for many generations in order to disconnect them from the families. Now, I know a lot about this topic because I have had sessions with a lot of people who were indigenous in other lifetimes or connected to an indigenous lineage, the Aboriginals, the Incans, the Mayans, many Native American tribes, and some that no one's ever heard of that are so old and from tiny islands in the Atlantic that many are not aware of, that date back thousands and thousands of years ago. And then, of course, Lemurian ancestors and some Atlantean times, and then some information coming from galactic lives and inner Earth. So all over the place, truly. And what I learned in a lot of those sessions is that the elders are the ones that are regarded as I mean, they're even called elders, actually, which is a status symbol. And not, again, it's never in a hierarchy. It's just a knowing of consciousness that these beings hold a lot of wisdom through their experiences for many lifetimes. So a lot of the councils are made up of these elders galactically, but also indigenously on this planet, and these tribes and these communities that are off the grid mostly. And the idea is that throughout your life, you learn a lot of information and you learn a lot of valuable lessons. And you carry that information not only in your consciousness, but through the collective and through the lineage. And so these fireside chats are actually a real thing where the elders would sit not only with their children, but really the grandchildren, the next generation, and they would sit with the youth, and they would bring forward information for them that they learned throughout their life, this wisdom, this great wisdom. And I think everybody can relate to that. I mean, even at my age of 42 years old, I have, my three children. Things that I knew 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or what I thought I knew as a child, have shifted dramatically throughout my lifetime through my experiences, both good and bad, the challenges that I've had, awakenings that I've had, traumas, all sorts of things have really expanded my consciousness, and I've learned a lot. So that term that we have in hindsight, or hindsight's 2020, is a real thing. But it's not that we should go back and regret or say, oh, if I could do it again, I would do it this way. Because in reality, you've done it exactly the way you were supposed to, or the way that it organically played out. And you learned from that, and it made you a better person, or a more evolved person, or a more compassionate person, a more empathetic person, a more intuitive person, whatever it's turned you into. Even the grumpy people, even the people it's turned them into a very negative person, they're still learning from that on some level, and then they'll have their awakening when they're ready for it. And then they're going to pull in all that wisdom and say, gosh, I wasted all that time, but okay, this is what I've learned. And it may not be in one life. It could take lifetimes for people to learn these things. So this is where judgment comes in. It's really difficult to judge people when you don't know all of the information. And it's not just what you see, it's what their thoughts, what they are thinking, what they've been through when you weren't there, other lifetimes, triggers, cellular trauma. There's so much. And it took me a long time to learn that, because I really distrusted and disliked many, if not most people around me, because of my traumas that I just imprinted on everyone else and assumed that they were going to hurt me. And it took me a long time through my own evolution and maturity to recognize that. And instead of allowing that to trigger me, it allowed me to look at people through different eyes, through more compassionate eyes, that, what have they been through as well? And maybe that they're a really mean person because of that, as a result of that. Again, we're not giving them a pass, but we forgive people at a soul level. We know that their soul wouldn't do that purposely or unintentionally, unless they were put in certain circumstances, or the 3D, because a lot of us are tempted into doing things we wouldn't normally do in this 3D environment due to the interference. So there's a lot of layers to this. But back to my original point. throughout our lives, we gain so much information, which is why grandparents tend to be so much more patient with children. I can't tell you how many times I hear, oh, my mom and dad are so calm and so gentle with my children, and they were never that way with me. They yelled, they screamed, they hit, they did all these things, and they're completely different people to my children. And some of them resent their parents for it. Some of them actually get really angry for it. And what's happening is they have lived their life, and they're not in the grid of it. They're not in that anxiety, fight or flight of trying to put food on the table and make sure there's income coming in and work, 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 and also trying to be a parent. When you're in that energy, you can, it's really challenging to be patient and really be the parent that you want to be, because you're trying to be the adult you need to be at the same time. So when you're much older and you've gone through all of that, and then you have grandchildren, you're much more likely to look at the world through different eyes, through kinder eyes, through gentler eyes. They have more patience. So when the grandchildren come along, it's less stress for them. It's like, oh, let me enjoy these kids. They're not my own. I raised mine. These are my grandchildren. I'm going to do things differently, or they just act differently naturally. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the evolution of our lives and our experiences and all of these things. And so it makes sense to me that the elders, the next generation, that they would spend more time with the young ones, because they do have all that wisdom, and they say, hey, I've been there, I've done that, didn't work for me, maybe you try it this way. And they hold the wisdom of many lifetimes, and they get really philosophical when they get older, and they are able to share a lot with the young ones that the parents aren't really in the energy necessarily to be able, or that space to be able to portray that or project that, or whatever it is, or explain it, take the time, whatever. And I'm not saying all parents. I mean, there are wonderful parents out there. I'm sure they do a great job, but not all of us have the time, the energy, or the wisdom to share, because we may not have our epiphanies until our children are raised, and we're like, oh man, I wish I could have told my 8-year-old that, my 10-year-old that, my 15-year-old that, at the time, but I didn't know that until now. And now they're adults. So just be patient with one another. But the point of this video is not that, it's not to shame anybody, but it's really just to show the importance and the significance of how the Indigenous really, what's the word I'm trying to think of, how they planned out their roles in their societies, their communities. And the elders played a big role in teaching the young through their wisdom. And the dark players, I believe, or I have been shown, know that. And so they've done everything they can to disconnect the elders from the home and so I'm going to go into the ways that they do that. Number one is the obvious one. So over time, a lot of the adults have been programmed so much that they've really been disconnected from their wisdom and their intuition altogether. So, I mean, that's like a no-brainer. Of course, they've done that. They're very plugged into the 3D, and that's because they were in survival mode most of their life, and they lost that connection to their intuition. So when they raised their children, there was no wisdom to share. It was survival. It was very primal. But that's not all of the population. I think that has a lot to do with the American population. But I've grown up with many Hispanic friends, because I lived in a predominantly Hispanic area for a while, and my children's friends, and Asian cultures and many other cultures except for Americans really still live by that, and the elders still live in the home, and they pass on that wisdom, and they're so wise, and we value that. But in America and a lot of the first world countries, what they did is they started to work on the programming, yes, first, through the regular 3D interference and the manipulation to create that sheep mentality, the herd mentality, follow your elders. And they forget who they are, they lose themselves. But the other things that they did, and you got to look at the long term, race with these dark players. They really are in for the marathon, not the sprint. So they're willing to be patient. They can wait 50, 100 years, sometimes generations. because it's not about the people in charge, it's people behind the people in charge, and the entities who are immortal, and they live forever. And then these families will just reincarnate and come through. So they don't mind waiting 100 years for something to carry forward. So they're patient. So in the early 1920s, when the family dynamics were much different, and a lot of the elders did live in the home. The grandparents lived in the home with the family because there were no old age homes back then. There were no senior centers back then, and the families took care of each other. But when they had this ultimate plan to divide the family, they did it in a very sneaky way, where women's rights, which of course women's rights are important, but when they manipulate us, that's when there's an agenda involved. So they start with women's rights. Women need to be working too. And all the while, their plan was to create 2-income homes so that the parents were both working tirelessly, full-time jobs. And now that two things happen. The children are left latchkey kids, or they are unattended and unwatched, or they have to go into the system earlier and earlier, daycares and preschools and things like that. But also no one's home to take care of the elders, as if they're sick, or they need more care and they're too old to take care of the younger ones. So there's the dynamic that started to shift. So they create the problem, and then, I have the solution. We'll put your kids in daycares, or we have younger facilities, bring them in at 2.5, preschool, and etc. Then on the elderly side, they create these old age homes, these senior citizen centers, and all of these variations of that, where they glamorize it. Oh, look how beautiful, look how cool. You can have a village where all the seniors can be together. And yes, the idea of that is fantastic for the younger generation. No, not all elders, or I'm sorry, not all recently retired seniors want to live in the home with their children. They want to go out and they want to be around like-minded, their age, and they want to have fun. So there's nothing wrong with the senior communities, but we're talking about when you make everything extreme and you push it to get the elders out of the home everywhere. So they create these elderly centers, these senior centers, communities, and they pull them out of the home. So now the children are left alone. They have to go somewhere. And now the seniors are pulled out of the home, and they're in these communities, these villages that they've created so that they make it look a lot of fun. But then unfortunately, it only is attainable to those that have the income to be able to pay for that, because some of these are quite expensive, these facilities. So then they create nicer ones that are less nice, and they are less expensive. But then we have those people that are working there that take advantage of them, and then there's abuse, and there's all sorts of even darker things happening in those facilities based on who's running them and who's controlling them, some of the government run facilities, etc. So now they're abusing the elderly, and even the younger senior citizens. So that's agenda number one. They're pulling them out, and then we lose connection with them, because some of them go in, and I have clients that are in those senior centers that say, I haven't seen my children. I see them once a year. I see them at holidays. So then they don't see their children anymore. Some of them are even out of state. All done by design. Again, I feel like I have to reiterate this all the time, because I don't want people to misunderstand anything I say. There's no judgment. If you're in one, if you are a senior in one of these facilities, or you are a family that sent your mom or dad to one of these facilities, there's nothing wrong with you. I'm not shaming you, just giving you guys an alternate perspective and the agenda that is behind making this and a massive, making this an extreme and pushing it. So that's agenda number one. And then agenda number two is to create Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and dementia. And all of these things are attributed or as a result of the food, air, water, toxins, the pharmaceuticals, pushing all the pharmaceuticals and the drugs that have all these horrible side effects. So many different toxins in our environment, you wouldn't even believe. But the point is that these diseases are created all to disconnect these people as they become older from that wisdom, when they should be connecting more to who they truly are in their higher consciousness. And if anything, they're disconnecting. Their neurological system breaks down, their hormones break down, their hearts start to break down. Cancer is so much more prominent these days than it was 10, 15, 30 years ago. This is all done by design. This is all done so that the elderly cannot pass on the wisdom. If they have dementia, if they have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or anything where it disconnects the mind from really functioning, and they lose memory. Not only do they lose their wisdom and aren't able to recall so that they can then pass that information on to their children and their grandchildren and their extended families, but they don't remember who they are, where they are, and they become disassociated. And what happens is when they die in a dementia state, or a state where they have no idea where they are, or that they've even died, or there's trauma involved in some way, or there's a shock to the system and they don't know where they are. Those are they become lost souls, and they don't know where they are when they cross over. They're more likely to go to the false light, and they get tricked, and then they get reincarnated and perpetually over and over into the wheel of samsara, to where they are taken into lives of suffering because they were falsely guided. Because when they died, they were confused. They were so confused. They didn't know what was going on. Good news is there are a lot of angelics and a lot of clients that I work with, and children that I work with, that in the astral realm, they are going to the void, and they are saving these children and elderly and adults that have died in those traumatic ways. And they are bringing them out of that void, and they're helping them find their soul family, and so they're no longer trapped. So there's a lot of good happening, but I like to kind of share both sides of it, because I don't want to be the person bringing all these negative videos out, because I always have some positive stuff. And sometimes it's about creating awareness. People might have an aha moment listening to something I say, and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. That doesn't mean you have to run out tomorrow and take mama or your mom or grandma rescue them out of the facility. Maybe some of them are truly happy there. But we want to just reevaluate why we put them in, and where they are, how long they've been there, and are they truly happy in what's happening to them. But I just want you to understand the agenda behind all of this is to disconnect the elderly from passing forward valuable knowledge. Now, of course, there is the other side of that, where there's the programmed elders that you're like, oh, I don't want my grandparents around my children because they're so far into the programming, so connected to the 3D, that I don't want my children to listen to anything they say. So remember, there's always multidimensional layers and truths and perceptions to every single category. No matter what we're talking about, there are variations of the truth. There are variations of how we can perceive any situation. And so there's the 3D agenda, and what they're doing, and why they're disconnecting, programming first the elderly throughout their life, so that when they become older, they don't have valuable information to pass on. Then they create illnesses so that those that do have valuable information or are connecting to their higher wisdom, they can't pass it on, because they lose all cognitive function, and they forget who they are, where they are. So they're not able to pass that information on. And then the other category, the other agenda, is pushing them away from the family so that they can be in these senior centers that also have the voice of God technology. That also have their own 3D interference, who also have nefarious characters working as nurses, as doctors, as caregivers, as psychologists, as psychiatrists, as caregivers, whatever their title is. Even some of the owners of these facilities that I've I haven't worked in them. I've done sessions where I have tapped into a facility that somebody worked in, and I said, "Ooh, bad news! This is really bad, dark energy. You might want to reevaluate working for this person." So it could be all the way up, and of course, some of these are tied to government facilities, and we all know what that the potential that holds. So the elders, what I see in the future is that we are going to go back to the indigenous way, and and other galactic indigenous tribals, and their way, which is regarding the elders as they hold the wisdom. They hold so much more knowledge than their counterparts, and so we want to listen to the information that they have. So I see them once again on councils, as part of like committees. But not just with the elders. I see these committees with young children, like I've said in many other interviews and videos, I'm sure. I see children as young as 5, 6 years old on these committees, helping to make decisions, helping to create or innovate or determine whether the information coming through is pure, of pure intention. They're human lie detectors. So anyways, the committees will have all ages, and it has to do with consciousness and density, and the wisdom. But we will get back, and we are moving more towards facilities that are more sanctuaries, so that the ones that do want to go to uh, a senior style living community because they want to, it's their choice, they want to be around other senior citizens, and they want to have fun in their life. Of course, our lifespans are going to extend, and so many things are changing, so it's not going to look like it does right now. But there will be sanctuaries where these senior centers will exist in the future, but the tone will be completely different. They'll be more holistic, more organic, not no manipulation or programming, because those in charge will not be able to be in charge of those facilities. So they'll be safe, and the families will be welcomed in. So I see a lot of these sanctuaries where a lot of the families come, and they're open doors, and many people come through, and there's a lot of children coming to visit. There's so much more to it than what I'm sharing, but I just want to give you guys somewhat of a glimpse. So there still will be senior centers, but they're more sanctuary focused, more organic, more holistic, more fun for them, but the right kind of fun. And then with a reevaluation of all of the illnesses and all of that, and I'll do future videos on the third part of my book later, where I talk about the future of health and wellness and leadership and etc. We won't be dealing with a lot of the nefarious illnesses such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and dementia and mental illness and all of these others, because the toxins won't be in the environment as much anymore until it's eliminated completely. And we won't be, the elderly won't be struggling with these diseases anymore. So they will be neurologically intact, and they will have cognitive function, if not as sharp as they were when they were young, because our bodies are evolving, our densities are shifting, and we are going to be different, and we are going to live much longer lives, and we are going to be just even more beautiful as we get older, as we grow, as we mature. It's beautiful inside and out, not just how people look, because I see a lot of that changing as well. One of my biggest pet peeves are people with big egos that just have to parade themselves all over the internet in these videos showing them their bodies off, and just the duck lips and all of that. It just drives me insane, because I'm like, they're so far gone. I feel bad for these people because they're so plugged into the matrix. They think that their beauty is determined by the validation of others, and we have to get away from that. Teach your children that their beauty comes from within, and the things that they genuinely like, not how big their lips are or how skinny they are, or how many likes they get for their pictures of them in a bathing suit. I'm sorry, it's not right. And I'm not judging anybody that does, here and there. It's fine once in a while. I'm talking about the ones discontinuously, one after another, male and female. Um, you know, they target us in all levels to tap us into our ego. So the more tapped in we are to our ego, the more opportunity we have for our shadow side to take over, and the more influenced we are by the shiny things in the 3D, which is the monetary stuff, the material stuff, and that's all a distraction. So our elders know that. They've always known that, for the most part, those that remain tapped in, especially the indigenous cultures. Okay, so that's the other part of this, is there's a reason why they have pushed the Native Americans, especially in the American countries, but all over the world, the Aboriginals. I mean, genocide and creating these reservations, which sounds like a sanctuary for them, but in reality, they're just prisons within just land that are prisons, where they are not even safe because of the things that happen within these systems to them. I'm not going to get into that in this video. Maybe someday we'll get into that. But the point is, they separate all the indigenous families and communities from the rest of the world, because they know that they have that wisdom within them. They know that they're not affected by the shiny stuff. Look at the Amish communities. I mean, there are so many communities around the world that are doing it the right way. and they are not manipulated, and they are not vulnerable to all of this because they have remained connected to their source, to their soul, their spirit, and the ancestry of their, not only their lineage in human lineage, but their soul lineage. I talk a lot more about, I talk more about this, and I probably explain it better in the book. So if you haven't checked it out, Starseeds, the book just came out on Amazon about 2 weeks ago. Starseeds and the Great Awakening is available on Amazon. It's also now available on Barnes and Noble if you prefer to shop there. I think I checked once and it's live, but I don't have the link yet, but I will put that out at some point. So check out the book. I go through a lot of the 3D interference in some in more detail than I talk here, and I think probably more eloquently put because I had time to write it out exactly how I wanted to. And so maybe I explain it better there. I don't know. But I hope those of you that have purchased the book so far are enjoying it. I have so many more of these videos to do. It's going to take me months to get through everything that I talked about in the book, but these bite-sized videos I feel like are good for people to just grasp one concept at a time so they don't get overwhelmed. So please leave comments in the let me know how you're liking them, or if you've had experience, or if you agree, or even if you disagree. Just be kind about the disagreements. We don't want to start any negative energy on my channel, please. So elders, you know, what decisions you make moving forward, I know have a lot to do environmentally, demographically, financially. Everybody has their reasons for what they're doing. So just think about what I've said and recognize that there is an agenda as part of this disconnecting the family unit, which is, again, I've mentioned a few times, and I'll do the woke agenda video very soon. And I'll talk more about the woke agenda and all the things they do to divide everybody even more. We'll get there. But until then, I hope this video finds you well. I hope that it's clear and it made sense to you. And until next time, I'll see you guys soon. Bye, everybody.